Uh, as you can see from the title, Jacinta has got another one. This time it's Vusumuzi, so-called apparently he's a doctor, this guy, Sibanda. Uh, and he's a doctor who advocates for, basically he's a globalist. Let's just cut to the chase. He's a globalist and he's pushing for this one Africa thing, disenfranchising cultures, disenfranchising indigenous cultures, basically removing all indigenous cultural identity to give way to this one Africa nonsense, which is an erasure of indigenous culture. But Jacinta once again doing the Lord's work on behalf of all South Africans. So let's watch how she put another one of these so-called Pan-Africanists in his place. It gets hot towards the end, so please stick around while we analyze this video and break it down.
Welcome back. Let's get a reaction now to the SIU report on home affairs. We are joined by March and March's Jacinta Ngobese Zuma and African Diaspora Network's Dr. Vusumuzi Sibanda. Very good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time. Dr. Sibanda, let's perhaps just start with you. I mean, the SIU report highlights extensive corruption that's involving foreign nationals and some diaspora communities. What's your reaction to this report?
Thank you very much. Good evening to yourself and the viewers. Look, it is a very worrying, kind of a situation. It is something that definitely, is that needs to be, looked at, very seriously, because, of course, what we know is that people that come from, different parts of the country look at South Africa as, a favorable, preferable, destination, and unfortunately, the corruption that then tends to happen is mainly twofold. It is born out of that desperation, and which does not legitimize that it should be done. But one would also believe that it is not only South Africa that is targeted by this level of corruption. All destinations that are favorable, like the US and so forth, obviously face that. The doorkeeper to that, and which is the most important aspect, is then to say, how do officials deal with this kind of situation, as we have seen that quite a number of officials actually have to deal with this. And maybe one of the issues that really did not come out very strongly in the report is that the issue of delays that take place, particularly with the processing of visas. I mean, you would notice that for quite a number of years, over a decade now, the department has been putting directives to try and cope with the delays that are taking place there. And I am sure that the bulk of these delays are not because the department really is understaffed, but they are calculated to create bottlenecks that then force the people that are making applications to be channeled to the non-formal, the corrupt system, where they have to go and pay to try and expedite. As we have seen that some people their visas seem to be out on the 21st, and on the 22nd money is coming in. Because every time when you deal with people that are making applications, you hear people talking about that they've got to push, they've got to speak with people that are pushing for their papers to come out. So we have got indeed a coordinated corrupt system that has got very two willing parties that are interested in making sure that they can corrupt the whole system. And unfortunately, the deserving people that come and make applications and try to follow the process, they are the ones that end up waiting for 5 up to 10 years in order for them either to get their asylum seeker processed or to get their visas, finally processed. But those that are willing to pay the money, they don't wait, for a longer period of time. And that is where the big problem really lies.
Jacinta, see you.
All right, guys, let's break down what this man tried to do there. So again, these people are natural born liars. What they do is tell lies and manipulate and misrepresent situations. He opened by saying that he's in no way making an excuse or trying to justify the criminality here, right? He said, and according to his perspective, it's twofold. The first is that it's born out of the desperation of the people who see South Africa as a favorable destination. For one, that has nothing to do with us as South Africans. He's asking us to understand that our country is developed and desirable for people to want to come here even illegally. What's that statement meant to do? How is that meant to make us feel, or what exactly is that meant to make us think? I think it's a very stupid thing to open up with, as if he wants us to understand that, hey, other people want the country you guys worked so hard for. No, duh. Of course, we know people want a piece of what we have in South Africa. That is not a justification for them to go and attain it by any means necessary. It's illegal. So he says, I'm not going to sit here and try to justify. And then he goes ahead and justifies it by making it seem like these people are helpless victims that are just so desperate because their countries are being run down. And, bruh, that is not our problem. And we, as the citizens, did not volunteer ourselves to be a destination for these struggling countries or people from these struggling countries. We didn't raise our hand and say we want to help. This is being forced onto us. So you cannot make us understand. Therefore, this is a guy with a PhD, and that's his opening argument. Then the second part he said is the corruption, which he said was the really big problem. So once again, he's not holding the criminals, the foreigners, responsible for their actions, irrespective of how desperate you are. Guys, you cannot commit a crime and then say, my excuse is that I was desperate. That's not an excuse. You're not going to be given um, mercy or seen in a different light just because you said, oh, I stole from this person because I was really desperate and I had no other option. So he immediately tries to paint the foreigners who are criminals as if they're the victims by saying, oh, this is born out of desperation. So what does that have to do with? So it's okay to rob somebody just because I'm desperate? That is justifying criminality. He opens up by justifying criminality. Then he says the big problem is not the foreigners who are criminals entering a country illegally. He says it's the officials at the Home Affairs Department that the SIU has busted because there's obviously a syndicate going on there where they're selling documents, expediting applications, and he says that there's a bottleneck scenario that is being created in order to frustrate. Again, the foreigners are the victims in this guy's perspective. He says there's a system of corruption that is designed to frustrate these foreigners. He doesn't care about the crazy influx of foreigners coming into the country that are destabilizing South Africa. For him, it's just about the foreigners getting what they want. Doesn't give a damn how South Africans think or what they think about it. We must just accept it and we must make things easy for them to come into the country because, hey, they're desperate and they have no other option. Why is this any of our business? Why is it our fault that these people can't govern and run their own countries and hold their governments accountable? That's none of our business. We didn't volunteer and say, hey, make this our problem. We don't want this to be our problem. It's their problem, but they're making it our problem. Why one? So now he's trying to shift the blame to say, no, this is a home affairs issue because they're creating a bottleneck situation which allows them to be able to collect bribes. Again, you cannot say that that's the big problem. No, these people are coming from their country. Nobody forced them to come from their country to come to South Africa. South Africa is not the only country in Africa that's doing well or better than a lot of the other African countries. Why don't they go to North Africa? Go try this nonsense in the Muslim countries and see what happens to them. No, because they respect the people up there, but they disrespect us and they want to force us to accept these ridiculous conditions. But anyway, I'm going to let Jacinta handle this man.
In your head there, I mean, Dr. Sibanda is talking about South Africa being a favorable destination and that sometimes out of desperation, corruption could be born out of that, even though he does say it does not legitimize some of these actions, but also emphasizing that there are two willing parties in this equation.
Look, I think what Dr. Sibanda is saying echoes exactly what our problem is as March and March, is that people want to give fancy names to all kinds of weird things. First of all, why do people who have problems in their country end up being a problem to other people's countries? This is the biggest problem that I have with the people like Dr. Sibande, because he is talking about an African diaspora, but now he's not talking about solutions for Africa. He's talking about bringing people to South Africa and making them comfortable with getting documentations to stay in South Africa. How is that going to fix Africa? If you're talking about a diaspora, you're not talking about South Africa. You're not talking about Africans being integrated into South Africa and getting documents, etc., etc. What else does their organization have to offer for Africans to thrive in their African countries? And I think this is a conversation that he and others need to be honest with themselves about. That it's clear now that South Africans are no longer comfortable, are no longer happy with other Africans, especially coming into their country, because we're so nearby. You just walk in, you cross the border, you disrespect our country, you keep it in a very different state to how we know it. You bring different weird kind of cultures and all kinds of things that we are not comfortable with. And it has nothing to do with hatred that the likes of Dr. Sibande like putting out there so that they can become victims. But it has everything to do with us as South Africans protecting ourselves. If you go to people who are veterinarians or people who work with animals, they will tell you how they protect certain animals and how they keep them from being extinct by separating them from other animals and allowing them to reproduce. Now, we find ourselves in a situation where we're saying that we're no longer comfortable with this inbreeding that's happening because we're losing our identity as well, on top of everything else. Is it not wrong for us to want to maintain who we are by keeping our culture, our religion, our integrity, our surnames, our heritage, etc., for ourselves? And the rest of Africa can do that same thing for themselves.
So before I give you a moment to react there, Dr. Sibanda, because I also see you profusely shaking your head. If we go back to the issue, Jacinta, of this particular report, and this report showing two willing parties that are in place that allows for the corruption that we are seeing, where a foreign national is not willing to wait in that queue, as Dr. Sibanda had outlined, and would have the buying power to then bribe that official that is sitting at the border. How are we as South Africans also taking accountability for those officials that are sitting in those places in ensuring that the corruption doesn't even begin there in the first place?
What a ridiculous question. And I think that Leho overall did a good job with this. But to ask somebody, how are we taking accountability for the corruption that's at Home Affairs with a few officials? How can we as South Africans take accountability? This gaslighting is crazy. So we must take accountability because of what corrupt officials are doing in Home Affairs and at the border office. No, we cannot accept that. They must bring those officials into Newsroom Africa and question them and ask them to take accountability and ask them why they're doing these things. Don't ask South Africans to take accountability.
Oh, the nice thing about this conversation is that I've just made reference to our very first memorandum that we sent to the Department of Home Affairs. And on top of the list of things that we had demanded, right at the top, was for there to be an audit of their internal structures. And that means that their very own employees and people who have influence, because within the employees, some are complaining that they're getting a lot of pressure from government officials to do certain things for them, for their friends, etc., etc. This is something that we're getting from the officials themselves. So that was on top of the list of things that we had complained about. And what we're saying is we're not absolving South Africans from any blame. We blame South Africans all the time. If you would know this, we even have a campaign currently that is encouraging people to open cases against South Africans that are aiding and abetting illegal immigrants. But we're saying that foreigners themselves are not innocent. And the biggest problem here is that everybody wants to make people coming from all kinds of places seem like they are the victims. And we as South Africans must automatically just be okay with it, or else you're going to label us as xenophobic. All of them are the same. You come into a country illegally, you're a criminal. You're not someone who must be romanticized and treated with child gloves so that you can feel better and feel like you are loved. If you want love, go back home. That's the best place where you can get love.
So, Dr. Sibanda, I mean, a number of issues being raised here. You raised the issue that because the corruption exists within the
You can already tell the framing of all of this is wrong because the interviewer is trying to hold the average South African accountable for the corruption that's taking place within a government department, as opposed to bringing those people from the government department in for questioning to ask them, why are you guys being corrupt? Instead, the average South African, Jacinta, is being made to answer for these people, is being made to speak for these people as if she's personally or I am personally responsible for the corruption of those individuals. You must call those individuals in and ask them because these are government workers, guys. We pay taxes to these people so that they can do their jobs properly. They're supposed to be representing us. And if they fail at that, bring them in, name and shame them. Let us know who they are. Bring them in, ask them questions. Don't say, oh, but Jacinta, there's also corruption happening within the South African borders. Of course, there's going to be corruption that takes place. We don't condone this corruption. In fact, what the way you see us as patriots doing what we're doing is to try to clamp down on this stuff to stop it from happening. But for the journalists and for the media to try to make it our job, because it's almost like they're saying, since you guys like talking so much and speaking out so much, why aren't you also speaking out against the Home Affairs person? But we do. That's all we ever do. We criticize, like Jacinta said, we criticize, we hold South Africans accountable. But in this particular instance, you have to get those people at Home Affairs and say, guys, we're naming and shaming you. You're doing A, B, C, D that you know is wrong. But they won't do that. They will protect those people and make it seem as if this is South Africa. This is who we are as a country. No, we don't want this corruption that's taking place. We don't condone it. We don't support it. Those people must be named and shamed, brought in front of the public, and they have to answer hard questions because they're selling our country. But don't make it Jacinta's responsibility to explain that particular person's actions. We're not advocating for this, like this so called Pan Africanist is advocating for criminality and justifying it.
borders, it then opens a leeway for this exchange between those that are coming into the country and those that are allowing it. When we spoke to the SIU spokesperson, Kaiser Khanyago, he in fact said of those that are being investigated and arrested now, it's a very small number of these officials. But he did emphasize that there are those at the borders themselves that are allowing for this kind of practice. Now, Jacinta is saying, before we even start speaking about bringing people into the country and ensuring that they're in the country in a particular way, what is the diaspora doing within those communities to ensure that the countries of which the people are coming from are giving better to those people before they even consider South Africa as a destination of choice?
Look, I think the challenge that Ms. Ngobese Zuma is actually having is that we're not real addressing, the problem that is raised by the report. Because if we were going to be looking at the fact that now we are talking about why do we have, this corruption, basically taking place. Now, what Ms. Ngobese is obviously trying to advance are her personal, beliefs of, a right-wing theory of saying you can, close South Africa, maybe to foreigners and where they come from or Africans so that they can fix their problems. And which is something that all countries in the world, by the way, first world countries, countries that have got better resources are faced with the same kind of problem of an influx, of migrants. That is why we...
This guy is supposedly a doctor. Listen to how poor his reasoning here is. He says, because the question posed to him by Jacinta is, what is the African so-called diaspora group doing, right, to bring stability to Africa, to bring solutions? The solution can't be, let's bring everybody to South Africa to displace the indigenous population of South Africa. That can't be your only solution. What else are they doing? He doesn't have an answer for it. So now he's moving the goalposts and saying, oh no, Jacinta's furthering her own agenda that South Africa must be closed and shut so that nobody can come. And he's like, but look at the whole world. Everybody's facing the same problem. So as if that's justification. That's like me telling you, hey man, there's nothing we can do about crime and murder because even first world countries have murder. Even America has. We don't care what's going on in first world countries. We don't even want to be compared to other countries. We're talking about the issues going on in our country. Stop justifying this nonsense by saying it happens everywhere else. That's the same thing, Cyril Ramaphosa. This is how you know it's a playbook by the globalists to say these problems of immigration can't be solved because other countries are experiencing them. So they're creating an echo chamber, right? It's manufactured of similar voices saying the same thing to try to convince us to accept this as a norm. That hey, America, first world countries that are better resourced, can't control the influx of immigrants. Therefore, let's just allow it to happen. No, why? The question is, why is it happening? This is what they don't want to address. What is happening in these countries that's causing an influx into specific countries? There's an influx into specific countries. Why is that? No one wants to answer that question. Everybody wants to tiptoe around the actual sort of root cause and pretend that we have to just accept the solution being illegal immigration and the displacement and replacement of the indigenous people. This guy is not smart. This is why I think his qualification is fake. He's in the country also illegally. His documents and paperwork are fake. He's already been exposed for buying them. And he can't argue at a high or superior level at all. He's talking about Jacinta furthering her own agenda. This is not Jacinta's agenda. This is what these guys try to do. They try to make it seem as if the representative of the South African voice is a single individual that's trying to advance her own personal agenda. You know, we're not falling for these cheap tricks. We see right through this nonsense. He's not a smart man.
Mediterranean problem. That is why we talk about, migration being so huge in America. The issue is that the people that are then, tasked with making sure that they control, the coming and going out of people need to make sure that they can deal with the criminals that want to corrupt the system because the buck stops with them. The ethical requirements, the commitment, the mere fact that somebody is paying.
This is unbelievable. So the criminals, according to his definition, are not the foreigners coming into the country illegally because he's given them an excuse. They're desperate. So it's okay. So what if we said, okay, the Home Affairs officials are also desperate for money? Is that justification? It wouldn't be, right? But somehow foreigners can come into the country illegally because they're desperate. Nonsense argument.
Do certain work means that they must be satisfied with their work. They will come across many types of criminal activities that they must, they must see from a distance. They must be able to decipher, investigate, and see that, okay, this is criminal, this is not genuine, this is legitimate. But the problem that we have, and which I said, it's unfortunate that the SIU has not picked that. It is specifically the fact that you've got people, you've got a system that is clogged. And the clogging of the system at the Department of Home Affairs is not by mistake. It is something that is calculated to ensure that people then end up not following the formal process of making applications.
Bro, you can't say that the clogging of the system ensures that people can still make a decision to not commit crime. They can still make the decision. They can still choose to not be criminals and enter the country illegally. On top of that, South Africa is not the only country. They can go to other countries where there's no bottleneck system that is corrupt. Why the focus and emphasis on South Africa opening up its borders? Why are they? Because this guy is not trying to solve this problem for South Africa. He's trying to solve the problem for immigrants by saying the officials need to work faster to to process people's documents so they can come in to the country. And he's saying that our officials are creating this problem so they can take bribes, but it's not addressing the core issue. Why are so many of these people coming into our country instead of developing their own? Where's the solution for developing Africa?
Are going to go and use the route where they are going to pay money because it appears as if the department is broken, the system is broken. I believe that the system that the department has is very it's quite rigorous, but it is for the people that are working within the system, that are corrupting that system, that are doing it for their own benefit. And yes, we hear that this is a very small number of people, but wait until you get to the border and you see people coming in and coming out, and see that people that are entitled to get, for example, 30 days, to come into the country, or to get 90 days to come into the country, they will be given 5 or 6 days despite what they request, until they pay money. Then they are given the number of days that they are supposed to be paying. So the level of corruption is very vast, unfortunately. And as it were, the level of corruptors as well is very vast, because people are desperately coming from these countries that are so broken, like what Ms. Ngobese is saying, that what exactly is happening there, which I think that is a discussion for another day, to deal with the problems that Africa has, that has got these push factors that get people coming into South Africa. But the issue is that because Africa has got such vast problems, and as a result, people will want to come into here, that does not mean that, then people can easily find access into the country. If the systems are rigorous, thorough, and followed to the letter, can you imagine somebody going into a Home Affairs, into Home Affairs offices with somebody to go and put in their fingerprints, so that their face, and details can then be put on a passport? That would not happen if the officials were basically doing their work without the intention of allowing, the corruption. So what we are really looking at here is a situation where we are saying both parties are guilty of the corruption that is there. But to start with, we must be very alert to the fact that people that are corruptors, people that want to commit crime, they are all over, and they will keep coming. But the system, if it is rigorous, manned by people that want to serve and do their duty diligently, then this problem is going to be lessened, in a very huge way. So if we see that the people, if you look at, for example, the agents, the people that are agents, that agents are out there. There are a lot of agents. Go to VFS, go anywhere where people make applications. There are too many agents that sit there and wait. Those people don't know anything about, making these applications. All what they know is to collect people's documents, because they've got somebody on the inside that they are working with, that they are actually, a gang of, or an organized, unit, that they are working together in order to get this document processed. So what basically happens is, you get people that are intermediaries, that are working with people inside, so you don't get the people inside. And that's where all the corruption comes in. Get rid of these agents, or get them properly registered, so that if there is anything that is amiss, they are taken to task, they are arrested as well.
Welcome back. Let's get a reaction now to the SIU report on home affairs. We are joined by March and March's Jacinta Ngobese Zuma and African Diaspora Network's Dr.
Is anything that is amiss, they are taken to task, they are arrested as well. And, the law is seen to be taking, basically its course. And then you'll realize that the bulk of this corruption is going to come down very hectically, heavily.
Dr. Sibanda, you say that the level of corruptors and those that are involved in the corruption is quite vast. And if we're looking at a case of borders where people are coming into South Africa, the starting point would also be from the exit country in which they are coming from. What role do you think those countries need to play because when you're leaving a country, it starts there before you enter into South Africa? Do you think there's adequate systems within the exit countries themselves that would stop the corruption at that level before the entry into South Africa?
For starters, there is corruption as well in the countries where they exit from. But you remember that now the exiting country does not have a responsibility to control people going out of its own country, because they allow people, to go out. But for countries like, Zimbabwe, that are joining countries, and maybe, Mozambique to a certain extent, that allow people coming from other countries, they allow these people in some cases as people in transit, and therefore their role is just to check that the person did not overstay in their own country without documentation at all, which means that they also pay their way from those countries to enter into South Africa should they come through the borders. So the level of corruption is coming from all these countries. The problem that we have when it comes to corruption is that I think we need to have an introspection as Africans, especially when it comes to the level of corruption that we basically entertain, and that is the major reason why maybe as a continent development has become such a problem, because we are not committed. We when we talk of patriotism, unfortunately, patriotism is what Miss Ngobese Zuma thinks it is, to stand and say, I'm defending, I don't want people coming into my country. That is not patriotism. Patriotism is basically saying that it's not about just hatred, it is about serving. And when you serve, you've got laws. And if the laws are not working, you campaign properly and make sure that those laws are basically changed, not to go out and misdirect people and rally people to do things that are basically unlawful, because that is what we are running away from. We don't do things properly as Africans. We always want the shortcut, and then we defend ourselves and say, well, look, we don't love ourselves because we talk bad about
The lack of self-awareness is astounding, because this guy is preaching about patriotism whilst he himself is a runner. Look, Jacinta's going to put him in his place. But the lack of self-awareness is alarming, because he says these people are escaping the corruption in their countries, but then also calls South Africa corrupt. So why should we be the release valve? If we are corrupt and the other African nations are corrupt, why must we carry the burden? Right? Why must we carry the burden? We could easily say we can't carry this burden because we are also corrupt, so leave us alone. Because the countries that are going through challenges, they are not the only countries going through challenges. So, what makes South Africa so special that we have to carry the burden while other countries are given the excuse that, oh, no, there's too much corruption there, there's too many bad things happening there, so therefore the people must run away? Why don't they bother the leaders there and call out the corruption and try to fix it in the same way and force people into those countries like they're forcing people into South Africa? You see, it doesn't make sense what he's saying. His argument, it just cannot hold.
systems. Even our leaders, they go out and say, look, when people speak about how broken the systems are, they say that those people that speak like that are people that are bored by the worst, that want to trash Africa. We should be saying Africa is doing quite well, when we have got such internal hemorrhaging that is taking place as a result of greed.
We are running out of time, Dr. Sibanda. I just want to get in the last thoughts from Jacinta. I mean, Dr. Sibanda speaks about those clogged systems at Home Affairs. He speaks about the role of government that is not protecting our borders, and the lack of patriotism also just of those that are supposed to be at the guards of our borders. What do you think we need to do as South Africans, Jacinta, as a starting point in order for us to be able to start curbing this corruption and the impact that we are seeing by the porous borders?
Look, Katlego, first of all, I just am going to sit here in utter shock that I have to listen to a man who came from his country to come and tell me about patriotism when he probably doesn't even do a thing about his own country that's about to change the constitution and allow for 2030 to happen. I've never heard Mr. Sibanda say a single thing to try and stand up for the people of Zimbabwe and stand up for his country. So he's the last person to tell me about patriotism and how I should exercise patriotism in my country. I'm not the one on a Zimbabwean national television platform fighting to get other South Africans documented in Zimbabwe, first of all. Second of all, Mr. Sibanda, my surname is Zuma. I'm Mrs. Zuma to you. And lastly, well, not lastly, but second to last, Mr. Sibanda, you are sitting here telling us about all kinds of corruption that's happening at Home Affairs. But have you ever for once reported that corruption? Because seemingly you know all the ins and outs. So if this report of SIU did not come out, when are we going to hear all these revelations that you know, Mr. Sibanda? It shows that you know and you're part of the system that is enabling all this corruption to happen, but you're not going to stop it because it enables Zimbabweans to leave their country and come here and rip our country and take off all our resources to benefit you as Zimbabweans. And you're not going to stand up for Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe because you don't have the guts to. That's why you only have guts here in South Africa, because you know that when you're in Zimbabwe, you're small cats. Also, Mr. Sibanda, let me tell you, for the longest time, we've been saying to you that there are too many illegal immigrants in this country, and you are busy telling us about ZDPs and all these refugee statuses, etc., etc. Now, do you consider a person that has fraudulently occupied and received documents to be in South Africa a person who is legally in the country? Of course not. That person is an illegal immigrant, and you, Mr. Sibanda, are also involved in that corruption. Why are you not telling Katlego that you also are trending and you are in the newspaper and in the news for fraudulently getting documents to be in South Africa? Now you've got a television platform that allows you to speak, and you think that you have been accused of standing up and admitting that you also went into that system and corruptly entered into South Africa. Why are you not telling the truth, Mr. Sibanda? Being on television must not absolve you from the truth of who you are.
Right.
And you are a Zimbabwean that's running away from who you really are, and that is a person that is in the country fraudulently but has been given platforms to speak, and you're using that to paint yourself as a victim. You are not a victim. You are part of the corrupt system, and you're not helping this country in any way. You
So,
need to go
Jacinta,
back to Zimbabwe and fix it for yourself and for your children and their future.
on a broader spectrum, Jacinta, how do we solve the problems that are faced by the millions of South Africans that is impacted by what this SIU report has now put out?
First of all, we solve the problems by not allowing Zimbabweans to tell us what to do in our country. It's our country, and therefore we need to know and say what's best for us. Second to that, we have departments and we have things like the SIU and the Hawks, which we're very happy that finally they've come up with this report and come out with it. Because when we met them for the first time, they did tell us that they are on to a report and they're waiting for a report from the SIU. This is what we were told from the Department of Home Affairs, and we are very happy to finally see it materialize, because we'd also been told that there's a lot of pastors who are mostly Nigerian, who are in the country committing all kinds of crime. And we're just asking for this to happen at a faster pace, because these people are organized. And the more organized they are, the more dangerous they are. So they're obviously not going to take it lightly. The fact that they are now being uncovered, they are now being seen and shown to the world for exactly who they are. Because all along they've been victims, and South Africans have been the xenophobic ones. But now that card is not even working to the rest of the world, because they are being exposed for exactly who they are.
Right.
And we need to, as South Africans ourselves, stop renting to these people. Stop buying from them. Stop keeping them in our homes. And to the women, stop marrying them. It starts with you.
Okay.
Every single decision that you make will impact the future of this country.
We certainly are running over time. Dr. Sibanda, just want to give you the last 30 seconds to give us your closing remarks and just how you find this impacting South Africa's relations with legitimate diaspora communities.
Well, look, starting from what the previous minister did, you will remember that I think for quite some time, the minister had put a moratorium of some sort on permanent residents and then investigations into what exactly has been going on. So we've seen the previous minister, taking quite a stance in trying to investigate this. And we've seen a number of officials, being arrested. We've also seen a number of foreign nationals like, the Omotosas and the Shepherd Bushiris that have been gotten. So one wants to believe that, a number of these activities that are taking place to try and curb. And we also see what has come in, especially with the digitization, of Home Affairs, which is going to help in a very huge way to make sure that, once people's biometrics are captured, one is hopeful that even the level of corruption might come down, and this will increase the efficiency of
The most dangerous thing he said there was the digitization of people's identities, basically talking about the digital ID, which is a globalist agenda. Guys, what people are not seeing is that all of this, the one solution they're trying to draw us to is that everything must become digitized. Digital ID. That's what is being proposed as the only solution, not closing borders, but allowing freedom of movement, but just with the digitization of people's identities, which is essentially Agenda 2030 is relying on this process, digital ID, in order for all the infrastructure of Agenda 2030 to be allowed to happen. But that is the only solution that is being proposed here. They're not saying let's fix Africa. They're saying let's cause as much destabilization as possible, much disruption as possible, uh, so that we can allow people to move freely as they want, and then we just digitize them to keep track of everybody so that there's no crime. This is why we have to be careful when we're fighting this thing. We mustn't just say, oh, it's about the crime and the no. We want to preserve our indigenous cultures. That's the key thing that we're fighting for. What they want to do is muddy those waters, muddy the genetics, make it so nobody can lay claim to a homeland, so that everybody can become an international slave. Hey, anyway, Jacinta, thank you so much for representing the country. Man, I hope it's not too loud. But anyway, I had to record this. Uh, I wanted to get this off my chest because I couldn't believe what this so-called doctor was saying in these interviews. But anyway, guys, that's it for me, man. Until the next video. Voila.